So just to sort of set the scene in this, obviously the vast majority of people on here would have been at the launch yesterday. And people long in the tooth like myself and you, James, we know that from a HPE point of view, they're fantastic at positioning the product, positioning the overview or the plan, the vision of what they're looking to do. But sometimes in these events, some of the detail or some of the more granular information that's useful for partners gets lost. So the idea of this was to have that conversation. So fresh in the mind from yesterday. James is fantastic. We've said this before, James. Typically, you're somewhere in the world at 38,000 feet, somewhere sort of flying in to meet with these big organisations that HP deal with. So while you are grounded, it's great to sort of take advantage of your knowledge and your understanding of HP and to get your views and insight as to what was announced yesterday. So I'll hand it over to yourself.
Thanks very much, and again, thank you everyone for your time. I know, after a year, everyone is sick of Zoom, Teams, WebEx, whatever other platforms are out there today. And we have got an hour and a half, but I'm pretty sure I haven't got an hour and a half's worth. In fact, I know I haven't got an hour and a half's worth of slides because I think, someone would beat me over the head if they were next to me. But the aim is to, and I will be honest, I thought what they did yesterday was great. There were loads of videos. It looked really flash, but like a lot of people, you would have come away thinking, okay, what is it and what does it actually mean? I'm going to say that because I've done 3 customer sessions this morning to go through exactly that.
Exactly.
So my aim for this session, and make it as open as possible, right? I talk really fast. People that know me will know that already. If you've got a question, we can either do it at the end or just shout to stop me, and I'll answer as we go. It's pretty informal, okay?
That's exactly it. That's the reason why it's in this format. That's exactly the right word, informal.
Yeah, and to be honest, the more questions, the better. So what I've got in terms of section-wise, I've got a little bit of marketing up front, but that's really to put some context around what they were trying to say yesterday, and then I'm going to show you what is actually behind the announcement yesterday, which is, and I think in a roundabout way, during all the buzzword bingo yesterday, a lot of people came away a little bit confused. And I'm also going to cover it, what's going to happen with the current portfolio as well, because that's not going anywhere either. So we'll get cracking. Any questions, shout. Don't be shy. There's never a bad question. And if you're thinking about a question, I'm sure someone else is as well. So get in there first. So a little bit of marketing stuff. And the reason for that is, we HPE for a long time have been talking about, we've gone through the we've gone through the someone's saying hello. We've gone through the all flash era, right? And we've largely lived and breathed this whole NVMe kind of myth for about the last year. But the world is dramatically changing, right? We have been driving the AI operations, the info site message, Nimble built a business on it. And we are trying to, build a bigger business on that. So I think everyone is aware of what we do from an info site point of view. For a lot of organizations, they have rapidly found out that public cloud is expensive, but it does provide agility and it does provide an experience that they like, which is this kind of generalized console to manage your stuff. And I'm going to use it in a really basic way. And, data creating outcomes, you'll hear it a lot, right? Data is the new currency. I think at the moment, lots of organizations have had the last 12 months where they have gone through so much digital transformation because they have been forced to, that there's, a lot of them like me, they're spinning plates and they're trying to work out how they stop the spinning of the plates, finish off projects and what projects need to start or carry on for the future. And from a technology point of view, it's all very well having the tin, and we are going to talk about tin that we announced yesterday, but it's how do we change the customer's experience to managing our infrastructure? And actually what yesterday was about was, and it probably didn't come across very clearly, is we want to become, or we are striving to become, the on-premise hyperscaler. And that is that is delivering good technology and robust technology and technology that delivers functions and features and performance. But we are talking about delivering the experience of managing that infrastructure. And that's largely what the simplified message of yesterday is we want to give customers a cloud-like experience for managing HP technology, whether that is in their data center, whether that is at the edge, or whether that is our cloud volumes that sits in a data center hall next to AWS compute or GDP compute or Azure compute, for example, but still drive what we were doing from an info site point of view. We've got we've got a whole bunch
I'm
of
on close now.
someone go on mute. So we've got a whole bunch of customers that are managing traditional applications, right? Whether they're virtualized applications, databases, ERP, and those customers are also trying to modernize their applications, right? That's been massively accelerated over the last 12 months. But the infrastructure to run those is largely the same underneath. And so when we're thinking about, the hardware landscape to deliver these modern or traditional workloads, we're trying to think of the experience that customers want in order to configure, operate, optimize, and keep those systems available. One part of that is being dealt with by InfoSight, and the other part of that was what we announced yesterday, which I'm going to call Storage Central, because cloud services data console, or whatever the marketing term is a mouthful. So our drive now is to reduce the management complexity. We are helping and are a long way down the operational capabilities using InfoSight. It's now the layer on top is that kind of manageability piece. And we're not talking about just doing this in the data center, right? And this, I don't know why my slides have gone a bit funny up here. We're talking about customers that are deploying infrastructure at the core, that are using cloud services, be it our cloud volume services or public cloud services, and delivering edge solutions. We are talking about helping customers across the board. So yesterday was very focused on storage. If anyone is familiar with Aruba, we've had Aruba Central, which is cloud-based operations for your Aruba devices. I'm going to say devices because it could be a data center device or a wireless device in an office. We've had that for a long time. What we announced yesterday is a similar capability that needs work over the next 18 months to bring it up to, doing everything that we can do on the boxes themselves, but also extending that to the core. So that will give you, to the edge. So that will give you an example is we've got networking, we've just announced storage, and in Discover, you can probably imagine we're going to announce something else, which is the other major component that we sell into data centers. And our aim is to build this engine that helps customers not only configure, operate, patch, and deliver services in a cloud-like manner, but have that integrated intrinsically into InfoSight, so you can do things like intent-based provisioning. And I'm going to cover what that is, because that was one of the things that we were announcing yesterday that I think got a bit missed in all of the flashy videos.
Yeah, that really sort of stood out. So that would be good.
Yeah. So think about, internally we call it the Harmony platform. So Harmony is basically where all of our physical data center products dial home to. It's a giant data lake. It's what InfoSight sits on, and we provide customers, a visual representation of that data through InfoSight. What we've built is the layer on top, which is to say, I'm going to use the power of the AI engine within InfoSight to help customers configure and run their infrastructure in a more effective way. And I'll go into some details of what that is. So what you're going to see is, we want to change the end-to-end customer experience, and you guys are going to help us with that, on how they collect data about aging infrastructure, how you can take that data using tooling that we are going to provide, that then runs that through some of the AI engines that exist within InfoSight today, takes some of the cleverness that we've announced around Storage Central, that helps you then say, you've got this, the ideal operating infrastructure for you to move to is this, but then providing this cloud-like management layer on top once they've deployed that. So cloud operations was the big announcement that was largely hidden yesterday, and we'll talk about that. We're talking about, you'll hear an awful lot about workload optimized systems. So for example, one of those might be, a TDI configuration for SAP HANA. So within this new cloud console, it's also going to be linked to GreenLake and GreenLake managed services. So from a customer's point of view, they can compare the cost of running something in AWS versus running on infrastructure they might already own on premise versus infrastructure that they might need to buy. Now, we are not at that point yet, but that is where we are looking to get to. So we are, after today's announcement, 20-month journey.
Sorry,
to
James,
deliver something that looks and feels a bit like the AWS.
You just cut out there. Sorry, for a
is
second.
that all right?
Yeah, you're back again now. Yeah, the last few seconds
right.
there, you just cut out.
All right. Okay, sorry about that. I'm not sure where that is. So the aim is to build this cloud-like management platform across all of our technology that helps customers manage and deploy workload optimized systems. So the aim is to take the kind of tweaking of the dials and having to understand, what a 9,000 UI looks like versus using a 6,000 UI versus using a primary UI, rather than having to worry about all that stuff. Is I need this, where is the best place for me to go and do it? And having a system that's linked to InfoSight to help customers go and deliver those workloads. And we talk a lot about hybrid, right? And this, I think, was one of the confusing things. What we aren't doing is saying that we've got a whole load of infrastructure in AWS, or that you can go and go do decide where your workloads go. But what you can do is the HP Cloud Services Portal, which is where GreenLake sits, which is where Aruba Central sits, which is where Storage Central will sit, and Fleet Management, which is the other thing we announced yesterday. It is a set of APIs that lets you control our infrastructure, but can also go and control anyone else's, or can be controlled by something else. So we, are truly building an operational model that looks and feels like a public cloud experience, and we release some tin underneath that. So think about that from a customer's point of view. If in a nutshell, we want to deliver the AWS Azure type operational management capabilities for our infrastructure wherever it resides. In a nutshell, is what was announced yesterday. The reason there is a new product brand is, and Primera and Nimble aren't going away. I'm going to cover that right at the end. But what we have now, and you'll see this, because we effectively now have an operating plane that can configure storage or provision storage, whether it's on effectively the Generation 2 Primera or the Generation 6 Nimble, it makes sense to have a single product name for those. And there's never a good time to do it, right? I sat with the Gartner guys and they're like, look, it makes sense to do it. There's never a good time to do it because it confuses the market, it confuses customers. But for this, it makes a lot of sense. So think about Alletra as cloud managed storage, but you can also manage it with inside the box. So don't worry, that's not going away, but it is cloud centric. And think about, Primera and Nimble Gen 5, which still have, by the way, a 2.5 to 3 year roadmap of features and hardware stuff. And I'll show you some of the stuff from Primera. Those are for customers that don't want to use cloud-based operations, or for customers that are in dark sites. We have a lot of government customers, or for some of those, we have financial houses that are also nervous about using anything in the cloud. So we have to satisfy both of those marketplaces for us. So Alletra is focused very much at modern management of infrastructure, because that's what it is. And Primera and Nimble are for customers that know they will probably get there in the end because that's the way the market's going, but cannot do it at the same speed as other organizations can do today.
I think one of the things they also mentioned on that, and I don't know if you're going to cover that, James, but at launch, these capabilities, as you mentioned, there are on the 6,000 and 9,000, but there are plans later in the year for that to be able to backward compatible onto the existing infrastructure.
So I was going to cover that on this slide.
So there you go. Sorry.
In terms of our positioning piece, where we have Primera and Nimble today, that doesn't really change, right? So if you look at it says new brand in there. I should have changed that to Alletra. If you look at an Alletra system, it is an all NVMe version of Primera. Even though it has a different operating system number, so it's 9.3 versus 4.3 on Primera, they are the same code base. They are just different hardware components. Now, the benefit that you get from Alletra 9000 is there is about a 35 to 40% performance density increase on that platform.
James, whoever's on, someone please go on to mute, whoever it is that is talking in the background, unless you've got a question.
There we go.
Oh, cool.
So Alletra 9000 for customers that are happy with cloud-based operations. I'll cover what that is in a minute, don't worry. For customers that are in dark sites or have very stringent compliance regulations and rules, we still have Primera for them. Now, the key thing here is, and there's no difference to our current positioning, there is no reason why a customer cannot deploy an Alletra 6000, which is the Gen 6 Nimble platform, and run all of their workloads on it, like they would do today on a Nimble Gen 5. And the same goes for a 9000 series. But the way in which we're positioned to the market is, if you need an all active architecture for the heaviest of workloads with the most stringent, service levels, that's probably, and you want things like the 100% availability guarantee, that's going to move you into a 9000 system. If maximum efficiency is what you're after, and your workloads are mixed but not really heavy sequential workloads and large IO workloads, then that still fits into a 6000, to a Gen 6 Nimble. The difference between these two platforms, for a lot of people that know the chassis size of the current Nimble, so we actually moved from Intel CPUs to AMD CPUs, which is quite a big change. It does mean there's a big performance boost on the Alletra 6000 platform, which is goodness for customers, and the form factor is smaller. Other than that, it does everything a Nimble Gen 5 does today, but it's all NVMe. So I think one thing we have been criticized for, and rightly so, is we should have got all NVMe out faster. So that's the key differentiator. If your customer says, I need NVMe, and they are today in the Nimble product family and they've had a great experience, then the answer for them is an Alletra 6000. Again, if you've got customers today that want all NVMe and they want the highest levels of availability, or they are a 3-PAR customer and have been a very happy 3-PAR customer, or they are already deploying Primeras because they've transitioned some of their install base into that, away from 3-PAR, then they are likely going to sit into this space.
Quick question.
Yes.
Can you replicate between Alletra 6000 and Nimble?
Yes. You can't do peer persistence yet, but you can replicate. And you can replicate between a Primera and an Alletra 9000.
Okay.
XP8 is not going anywhere because we use that for non-stop computing, so that largely remains in the pocket that it sits into today. So I guess the key thing is what we've been poor at before is confusing people. If you have happy Nimble customers today, and they want to move to all NVMe and they are happy with cloud-based operations, then absolutely move them to Alletra 6000. The same goes for 3-PAR. So let's not make sales complicated for ourselves. Let's, if the customer is happy, they're a happy install-based customer, let's just move them on to the latest and greatest. If we are going to attack the market, i.e. it is one of our competitors, then we just need to understand what they've deployed today. If they're a PowerMax customer, they're going to sit up here. If they're a mid-range customer, depending on what they're doing, they're probably going to sit in this space. The key thing is we are expecting, in probably tomorrow, Dell to announce something very similar to what we've announced today from a cloud operations point of view. And I suspect Pure Storage and the rest of them will be very close behind. Again, from a positioning point of view, Mr. Customer, what do you have? Are you large scale databases, large scale consolidation projects? So, one of the banks I'm working with, we're looking to go from 157 3-PARs to a much smaller number of arrays. That's going to fit into this camp, and they're a happy 3-PAR customer, for example. Again, from a Nimble point of view, what's the type of workload? Again, if they're a Nimble customer today, they're going to be a happy Alletra 6000 customer with more features and with more functions from an operational point of view sitting on top of that. So positioning doesn't really change, is what I'm saying, from what we had, currently with Primera and Nimble. Those positioning statements, the way in which we talk to customers, the way in which we approach the customers have not changed. It is just new generation technology using all NVMe. There is a hybrid Alletra 6000 coming, before you ask, and the DHCI stacks we will provide DHCI stacks for Alletra 6000 as well as Nimble Gen 5. One new feature, which was the only new feature that was talked about but not really given any specific detail, and is specific to the Alletra 9000, is, I don't know what is going on with my slides today, but they seem to have gone all funny, which is active peer persistence. So today we deliver peer persistence on Nimble Gen 5 and Alletra 6000, but in that world you tend to have one active site and one passive site, but it provides that automated failover. We can do the same on Primera and on Alletra. We can have that same, what we're going to class as classic peer persistence, where all of my workload runs here, and this is effectively my warm site. But with the 4.3 release for Primera and the 4.3 release for Alletra 9000, customers will be able to go to active peer persistence mode, which means I can run workload here and workload on my right-hand side, and I can replicate in both directions, and I can fail over in both directions. And it is 100% transparent to the workload. So to give you some context, in the Primera world, if I fail this side, it takes about 7 seconds in classic peer persistent mode for this to start serving IO. In Nimble, I think it's around 23 seconds, 24 seconds. So in active peer persistence mode on Alletra 9000, it's completely transparent to the host. So if you've got customers that really need the highest levels of availability and the least amount of touch in an environment where something goes wrong, then again, that would direct you towards an Alletra 9000. So this is new and it's coming to both platforms is what I'm saying. And this is, to give you an example, is if we release something on Alletra 9000, it will absolutely be on Primera unless there's some very specific reason we cannot. And at the moment, I haven't seen any of those today.
That's really good.
Yeah, so one of the things that's also that was not really mentioned is we have the Trusted Platform Manager, which has been integrated into the Alletra, and that becomes important when we talk about how this box is set up in the cloud operations side of it. It's also in the Alletra 6000 as well. It's very similar, a similar concept to the Silicon Router Trust that we have on the ProLiant range, is we have kind of brought that into the storage, and we brought that in for two reasons. One is because fleet management is going to offer automated patching of infrastructure, and therefore we need the Silicon Router Trust to make sure everything is safe when we automate that process. But also we need this secure certificate exchange when we're configuring boxes and setting Storage Central up. We're going to kind of cover that piece now.
So James, just quickly
yes.
on that. So there's no
Yep.
use. You don't need a call and witness or anything. It just
no,
manages it.
there is still a core and witness. There is still a core and witness. Yeah. And you can transition on a Primera system from classic peer persistence to active. You can actually do that online. And there's a guide that gets, I think, all of the documentation. And this is the one thing that we actually have done a really good job of with this release is, firstly, we had all the documentation done up front, including all of the security documentation, which we didn't really do a very good job on Primera or on Synergy, if I'm honest. So that is largely all available. There are a ton of tech talks available that have been happening inside of HP that will be made available now because we're past the launch date, and there is some really good content and some really deep dive sessions. Some of them are like over 2 hours long. So we've done a much better job for the 6000 and the 9000 versus what I think we've done previously. And the other thing is, you know, like we did on Primera, announce in June and ship sometime in October, you know, we've announced on the 4th and we're shipping from the Czech Republic on the 25th of this month.
Nice.
So, you know, pricing is, bar a few pricing issues in OCA today, you can price them and you can ship them at the end of this month. We're doing it.
That's one thing I would say. As the launch was going ahead, I went on to Seismic, and all the data was there at the moment of launch, and it is inundated with stuff. I've never seen so much collateral being released by HP. It covers everything.
There were an awful lot of there's an awful lot of people throughout last Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday opening documents, doing a control and replace for new brand for Alletra. I can tell you a lot of that was going on, but it's good because, you know, in order to, you know, launch something that's so fundamentally different from a management perspective, and that's what this is, right? The real difference is this is just storage. This is just Primera Gen 2, and it's Nimble Gen 6. So don't, you know, if customers are asking, it may have a new brand, but this is built on the pedigree of those technologies, and it has the same features and functions of those technologies. The kind of the new bit is this cloud management bit that we've launched, and this kind of, and I quite like this slide actually. I don't know where I stole it from, but you know, if you think about anyone, no matter how small the environment or how large, in order to configure a workload, you typically have to touch 2 or 3 things. You might have to touch the storage initially to present up to an ESX cluster, and then you can do 90% of what you can do through vCenter is one example. But if you're automating, and a lot of customers are using Ansible and trying to reduce the mundane, you know, the mundane daily tasks, you know, again, you have to have, you know, workflows that touch 3 or 4 different bits of infrastructure. Now you think about logging into AWS, I want an instance, I want this service level, and I want that performance storage, and I click go. That is the experience that we are building. So we've got the nice hardware products, that's great, but the experience we are building is taking customers away from this kind of having to do everything at different layers and automate at different layers, and saying, look, you deploy the infrastructure and let Storage Central or Aruba Central, or I'm going to call it Compute Central because that's coming as well, you know, manage all of that through a single pane of glass. And if you want to automate it, don't do it down here, automate to this and let this come and talk to our infrastructure. And we have been talking for a long time, probably 5 or 6 years, like infrastructure as code. We're actually starting that journey. So we're doing this, you know, if you're Joe Bloggs around the corner, or we're doing this at scale. And the aim is to simplify over time as we add features and functions, is to make the overall management, no matter how big or small your infrastructure is, as cloud-like as possible. And that was really the message. Deploy some storage, it's nice, but we want to change your operating model and make your operating model much more like a public hyperscaler, which I think was slightly lost in translation. So from a 9,000 point of view and a 6,000 point of view, they are already supported for fleet management and intent-based provisioning and already integrated with InfoSight. And I will cover what that means, I promise, in the next few slides. We are adding Nimble Gen 5s. I'm not sure about Gen 5, but I know, sorry, about Gen 4, but I specifically know Nimble Gen 5s, which probably means the rest of them because it's the same thing, and Primera will also be integrated into Storage Central in the summertime, in the summer this year. So customers that have just deployed Primera or Nimble will not lose out. And this is a subscription service. So we are still running GUIs on the box. We're still running the CLI on the box. We still have a REST API on the box. But the aim is to lift customers out of that world and start managing things from a cloud console perspective. Now, what they've done, and I know people have been going, what subscription? Scary. There is a 3-year, 4-year, and 5-year subscription. So to the customer, it can look like a GreenLake monthly cost, or it can look like an upfront capital cost. How we recognize it at the back end is our problem, and we recognize it on a monthly basis because it's a subscription for us. But you cannot deploy these systems without Storage Central. And I'm going to talk about what the connectivity looks like and to kind of ease some of the fears. And the way in which they've worked the pricing, and I don't do pricing, right? So I'm going to give you how it's been told to me is they have reduced the list pricing of the physical hardware to add in the cost of the subscription. So the overall pricing, yes, there's a small bump because we're going from SaaS ported technology to NVMe ported technology. We're going to new boards. We're going to AMD on the 6000 and newer Intel, slightly newer Intel on the 9000. So it's not the same price, but it is not like 60% more expensive. So before you get scared, we're trying to package it so that customers are like, oh, right, it's just like buying a normal system, and therefore, why would I not look at it? And of course, you can still GreenLake these systems. Now, where it is different, during the manufacturing process, a third party initiates a certificate into the Trusted Platform Manager, and that is unique to that box and unique to the customer it is going to. When it gets to customer site, they have to physically install it like you normally would, or you can physically install it for them. You power it up, you connect it to the network, and then you open port 443, which is the same port we dial home from. And this is the really important stuff. There is no inbound connectivity. It's outbound only. So if customers are like, oh, I can't have something coming into my data center and configure my box, that's not how it works. This is an outbound connection. So we're sending data to InfoSight. So for customers doing that today, they shouldn't have an issue because we're not changing that. At the same time, when that first connection happens to InfoSight, it basically takes the certificate. We have issued another certificate for the Storage Central element, and the two get married. I know that that array belongs to that customer that's shipped to that location, and this is your instance of Storage Central. So we fire up an instance. I'm going to use the term instance because it's just the easiest way to do it. This is running in HP data centers, but it is a microservices architecture. It fires up that customer's individual Storage Central, and you have an organization level. From that point, you can create roles and responsibilities for people to do different things. Someone might have a view only, someone might have a view and configure, so there's full roles-based access, and it is very, very detailed what you can and can't allocate to your end users. So it's really detailed from that perspective. So you will then configure the box in a normal way, give it IP addresses, connect it to the network. It's got its management network because you can still use the onboard UI and you can still use the onboard REST API and CLI. So that bit is just done by Storage Central. And then if you really want to, if you absolutely want to, you can actually disconnect, but then you lose your capability for InfoSight. But what happens once that initial configuration is done and you've created your roles-based access controls, then you've actually brought the system online, which is the same process for 6000 and the 9000 it is on a Nimble and a Primera. You can then start to configure your storage with the features that exist today. So very, very simplified. Now what happens is that outbound connection is polling Storage Central to say, have you got anything for me to do? Have you got anything for me to do? So it's using that in the outbound as a call for a REST API. So it isn't something having drilled and bored a inbound hole into your data center. It is not as an outbound. And there are two very good security documents that have been written for customers to read, but we are using secure encrypted TLS, which is what the federal AWS environment looks like for the CIA, for the NSA. So we're following all of the same things, and we are going through what's called FedRAMP, which is the most impossible level of certification. We've already started the process, but it takes about 12 to 18 months to be approved. So the other way to, because customers are going to get scared by this, and I know they are because I've seen our own HP sellers go, oh, no one's going to go for that. It's outbound. It's basically like dialing home to info site. And it is the most secure communication connections that you can have on the planet today that is used by every public cloud vendor. So if they're using Office 365 today, if they have deployed anything in AWS, if they're using the AWS console, if they're using the Azure console, they will already be doing this. So that's the key thing. But there are documents that have been published last night. So what we're doing initially, so like all things, right, there is, we're not releasing it with every single feature on board because it's just almost impossible to do that. So the key thing is you can manage it from anywhere. So me, as a roles-based access person, I go to HP Cloud Services, I put in my credentials, and it fires up Storage Central in my container for me to do stuff. So I can do that from effectively anywhere, because the minute I log off, it shuts down my container and that connection is broken. So there's a new container, there's a new microservices Storage Central started every time a user logs in to do something. So that's the first thing, that's sitting in our data center. So you can effectively, the example yesterday was you could manage it from your phone while you're driving, but I don't advise that. But the concept is there is, if you're an AWS customer, anywhere in the world, you can log into your console through any device and start configuring stuff. And we have delivered the same through Storage Central. I'm going to cover the intent-based provisioning because that's the first feature that we're releasing. A simplified deployment means, let's say that you're, like I've just done with a customer in the UK, we've just dropped 6 Primeras into 3 different data centers. I could have them all powered up, have them all connect to Storage Central, and I could start configuring those just even at a basic level to turn them on and get them ready to provision through a single dashboard. I don't have to touch every single box individually. That's a huge change. Now, we're doing that on Aruba networking ports and wireless devices. Imagine having the capability. Look, we've just built out a data center. These 6 data centers is something like, I don't know, across the 3 data centers, 700 DL servers, 6 storage platforms. Imagining just logging into HP Cloud Services and bringing all that infrastructure online. That is a huge departure from having to touch all 6 arrays to build them manually, to then connect them out to a fabric, to then, start provisioning storage. That's the mind shift that we need to get customers thinking about. The box is nice and the box is fast and we have the same features, if not better, as everyone else. It's the operational change that will deliver agility and simplicity and benefit to them, no matter how big they are. Even if you're a 10 server, 40 terabyte array, easier to touch one platform once and do everything through there than touching your 11 individual infrastructure bits and your networking. Invisible upgrades. So think about, being able to, in Storage Central, for example, you might have 2 legacy Primeras, or you might have, you've got a legacy Primera, a legacy Nimble Gen 5, and you've got a new Alletra 6000. And there's a critical security patch that's released because it's security related. It needs to be on all 3 platforms. You get notified because the notification comes up through InfoSight into Storage Central, being able to click into Fleet Management and saying, okay, which boxes do I need to put it on? Do I need to make any changes to those boxes before I do it? No, I don't. I want to schedule that patch for tomorrow night, the next one for the night after, the next one for the night after, and have that whole process automated. Imagine doing that across your DL or Synergy server frames. That is a fundamental shift away from what customers have to do today when it comes to patching and upgrades. So think about, that's one of the first features in the Fleet Manager, is this kind of automated patching of infrastructure. On the storage side, it's coming on the rest. So a big, big shift in how customers manage. So you think about, provisioning storage. This is where the intent-based provisioning comes from. I'm not going to, this is a right eye chart, but there's a whole bunch of steps that, Mr. Single Operations guy that manages the stack versus, someone at Deutsche Bank that is managing a third of the infrastructure. There's a lot of stuff that has to happen you know, in order to provision storage, I need 2 terabytes. Okay, well, how fast does it need to be, and how, you know, and then you have to go and work out whether that's going to run on the hardware that you've already got, do all of that stuff manually. So imagine being able to log in to a single system and say, you know, I've got a workload. There's a drop-down box. It's Oracle. I need 5 terabytes. I think the workload looks like this, and then have Storage Central drop into the InfoSight data lake and the telemetry that's from those infrastructure components. There could be, you know, 30 arrays in a data center, could be 2 arrays across 2 data centers, and come back and say, hey, actually, anyone can do this workload. Where do you want me to go put it? Because I've got a 6,000 or a 9,000. And just say, okay, I want to put it on the 6,000, it will go away and provision it on the 6. Or I want to put it on the 9, it will go away and provision it on the 9. Single interface, regardless of the technology that sits underneath it. Think of all the manual steps removed. Think of having to drop down into the individual GUI on that box to go provision it, removed. And this is where we talk about workload deployment. Tell us what the workload is, tell us what it looks like. If you know that, if not, use InfoSight data to do it. And then how much capacity do you need? Okay, who's capable of doing that? That's a fundamental shift to how people provision today. And this is the first thing that we've kind of released, and it will get more and more advanced as we make iterations of this. So fleet-based management and intent-based provisioning, and then you've got the health dashboard, which is pulling up pertinent information from InfoSight, and it also is comparing your configurations against a number of policies of which that are built into the system. So we've put a whole bunch of policies in there for customers, you know, things to do with the banking compliance, but you might create one that's something to do with security, or something to do with the sizing, or something to do with the naming conventions. So having a single place that says, hey, look, someone's provisioned all this stuff, but it's totally out of compliance. Go and address it before it becomes an issue. That's, you know, that's in the system today, and that will get more advanced over time. And you think about, I'm just talking about storage here. You know, imagine when we got the capability across compute, and we already have the capability today within Aruba Central. So again, nice NVMe, all flash hardware, you know, performance boost on what we have today, but it's this piece that is, you know, even if you are, you know, one man managing a stack of infrastructure versus 1,000 operations guys, doing it in one place is easier than touching all of the elements in the box. The other key thing is we have a north and south based REST API. So if you're a larger environment and you have different technologies from different storage technologies from HPE, you only need to automate it once, because you send your REST API commands to Storage Central and let Storage Central go through the intent-based provisioning and go, I'm going to go and put it over here. So again, if customers that are automating, that might improve that process. We're seeing a lot of customers use VMware Cloud Foundation as their control plane. Guess what? One of the first things we're going to support is VMware Cloud Foundation, because we already support it inside the product today. OpenShift is another one. Kubernetes is another one. So not only are we making it easier to control our stuff, you know, if you are configuring it or your customers configure it, but if you are automating it, you can come and do that through the console as well. So much, much faster than it was previously. And this is this kind of unified API, almost like like OneView. Imagine taking OneView up a level, so it really does sit across all the infrastructure. That is what HPE Cloud Services is going to deliver. Within those cloud services are going to be, or in the cloud portal, will be your Storage Central, your Aruba Central, your GreenLake Central, but also then, you know, potentially having the ability to subscribe to other services. So there's new things coming to InfoSight in September, and being able to say, oh, I only need that on these 15 servers, not all 100, and being able to push an agent out and then start collecting data and start showing that telemetry. So it gives us this kind of baseline to provide that hyperscaler operational experience on our infrastructure. And from a Primera point of view, some customers are like, oh, you know, I've just bought Primera and I want all NVMe. We're doing NVMe today inside the chassis. If it's a 2U chassis, you get 8 slots. If it's a 4U chassis with 4 nodes, you get 16. We're going to increase that by adding 24 drives through a JBOF. Just a bunch of flash is what that stands for. So for customers today that have bought Primera or just in the process of buying Primera, they aren't going to lose out, because they will get access to these. All the orange ones are NVMe drives, by the way. So they will get access to scale their NVMe capability out. These platforms will support NVMe from the host all the way to the back-end drives. And in the summer, you will start to see Primera and Nimble Gen 5 available to manage and configure through Storage Central. So we aren't leaving any customers behind. I think it was the term they used yesterday, and I quite like that. And we have quite an elongated roadmap for both products, because guess what? Even though the new brand, Alletra, is a 6 and a 9000, they are the same code bases. There are some changes in Nimble because we've gone Intel to AMD. And, you know, as the Alletra 9000 and the Primera, you know, we are starting to phase down what we do in the ASIC, because we're aiming to deliver infrastructure as code. And that's our long-term aim. And we can't do that unless we have this cloud operational model, which is what we've started yesterday. And by the way, that's not, you know, it's not, you know, we've announced it and you can start to have some features. You know, they've been building it for about 10 months. And there has been a Herculean bunch of people that have got this ready. And the plan is to have it feature rich within about 15 to 16 months. And I know that sounds like a long time, but time goes quickly, and they will trickle these functions in a bit like what we do in InfoSight. Because this platform is not, because it's not a UI tied into a platform. As long as the REST API calls exist on the hardware platforms, they can trickle features and functions into Storage Central and Fleet Management on a monthly basis without you even seeing, because it's a microservices platform. Stop the service, update the service, start the service. So what we'll see is a much faster pace of engineering on this operational platform than we've ever seen in any UI that sits inside a box. And we will move to, I can tell you, we will move to, and this is not going to happen anytime soon, but we will move to a point where, you know, our storage products don't have a UI because they won't need one. Because everything will be managed either through an open REST API on the box, which we'll need because everything will be done up through Storage Central. So the next set of features we'll see coming in are snapshots and clones, and then replication is a little bit further out. We have Recovery Manager Central today, which is a snapshot director. You'll see a replacement for that announced in Discover. So all of these will be available to drive through that portal, regardless of where it sits globally. And this is the other thing, you know, I might be managing equipment in APJ, I might land in APJ, you know, need to do something really quickly, log on and send that back to a data center that I've just left in London, for example. So again, in your mind, I know I'm hammering this point home, right? But I've seen people get scared, our own sellers get scared, and I've seen some customers, you know, kind of really struggling with the concept of what we're doing. 2 new all NVMe platforms built on the pedigree of Primera, 3PAR, and Nimble, but just all NVMe, but a new cloud-based operating model. Mr. Customer, if you use AWS or you use Azure, do you like the experience of how you get things running? Yes, that's what we're going to deliver to you with this platform. It's not fully functional day one, but it will be in the next 16 months, and we're going to trickle features in. And as we make things like InfoSight more advanced, there's some cool stuff coming to InfoSight. As we make that more advanced, they are intrinsically linked. You know, we made an acquisition of Cloud Physics. I'm not sure if anyone's heard of that, but they collect, they're a bit like a data collector, you know, to help you size infrastructures and environments and compare public cloud to on-premise. That will be integrated into HP Cloud Services as well. So you can use it to go and help a customer size, but you can pull that data into their cloud console and then together work collaboratively online with real data in real time to size replacement systems. That's a completely different experience to what customers have today from most vendors, if not all vendors. So again, this is redefining how us as a business and you as our partners engage and deliver an end-to-end service with customers. And I've whittled on, and I'm going to stop and see if there's any questions.
That's fantastic. James, just a quick one, just in case,
Yep.
Obviously everyone's heard of NVMe.
Yes.
But if there's anybody out there that doesn't sort of get it or
Yep.
understand what it is, I know obviously from a performance point of view, that's the key thing, but can you just give them a brief overview of what that technology is?
Yeah, so there was and there still is an awful lot of FUD and nonsense noise about what NVMe is. So for the best part, well, forever, when you move data anywhere, we talk SCSI. And SCSI has been around for decades, and it's really reliable, but it's really slow. NVMe is replacing SCSI. And it is a way of moving data. It is not a drive technology. It is not an array technology. It is a protocol to move data from A to B. and it does it significantly faster than SCSI. So to give you an example, if you had a traditional Windows server next to a traditional Windows server using SCSI that's connected to an all NVMe array, and you had a operating system sitting next to it, Windows operating system sitting next to it, which is using NVMe talking to the array, if you're reading data from the array, it will probably be at the host 50% quicker than versus SCSI. So it's a very effective way of moving data very quickly. And we can do that over fiber channel, which is nice, but more importantly, we can do it at the same speed, if not faster, over Ethernet. And if you look at what most organizations are striving for, and this is a great term, and I stole it from Goldman Sachs, is they have done this very successfully, which surprised me for a bank, but they strive to have a single cable in the data center, which is Ethernet. And now with NVMe, that has become a reality because they don't have to use iSCSI and they don't have to use fiber channel, and they can deliver blisteringly fast performance. It is a protocol. It is not a drive technology. It is not an array technology, but everything has to support it to make it work really fast. We're providing all NVMe storage. We will support Red Hat, VMware, and Windows initially, and then we'll move on to other operating systems. But applications have to understand that they need to change. And if you've got a user that's sat, 70 miles away from the data center and they've got a floppy bit of wire between their data center, they probably will never know the difference. So, there's a lot of change that needs to happen from the desktop or the laptop or the thin client all the way down to the storage in order for NVMe to truly deliver on its promise. It's a long journey, and we're on that journey now, but it's a long way. SCSI took years to get to where it's got to. It's been around for 50 years, I think now, 60 maybe. So NVMe is 2 years old or 3 years old technically, but that gives you an example of the difference between the two.
I've read somewhere, I don't know, that if you look at the hard drives on the SCSI protocol, it would be 1 queue per command, but NVMe is 64,000 queues.
Correct.
Each one of those queues is 64,000 commands.
Correct.
All at the same time.
Yes.
So that gives an idea of the performance increase.
It's very similar to, we went from physical operating systems to virtual machines to containers. Right? SCSI to NVMe is a very similar journey. Look, everyone, we've been the hype on containers has been stratospheric for 4 years, but it's only the last year where COVID has hit hard that has really forced customers to modernize their applications and move away from physical operating systems and virtual machines to containers. And it will take something probably monumental for a really big, fast shift to all NVMe. The point is, with Primera, with Alletra 9000 and 6000, customers will be ready for that transition when it happens.